His name is Curt, a really funny guy, and this is his podcast, In the Wry. It's the In the Wry Podcast. Curt Fletcher.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. It is episode number 53 in the Wry Podcast with Curt Fletcher. I'm Curt Fletcher, obviously. Growing my hair out a little bit. I'm starting to look like a Michael Myers character, kind of. I don't know if I like it yet. What do you guys think? Keep it going? Cut it? I don't care. That's not so bad. We'll see. Anyways, I'm trying to switch over to a new format for the podcast. Instead of doing interviews, I am just going to do a solo podcast from now on. I'll still have guests from time to time, but it's not going to be like, an interview type thing. It's going to be more, just shooting the shit type of deal, talk about what's going on and things like that. So that's what's going to be more like now. Just whatever's going on in my world, I'll talk about that. Pretty much anything except for politics, because I think that's fucking stupid and I hate it. And I'm sick of it, to be honest with you. So yeah, let's get into this. First of all, I want to thank Jarrett Riddick from Bowling for Soup for my intro music. And they've got a new album out. You should go check that out. It's pretty awesome. And also thank you to John Singleton from Anesthesia for outro music. And Anesthesia is awesome, so look them up. They just won an award recently at a New Mexico Music Awards type of deal. It's like the New Mexico Grammys, kind of. And they won an award for one of their songs. So that's pretty cool. So shout out to those dudes. Love those guys. They've always been super cool over the years. And they're also big comedy fans, which is cool. Jake, the singer, I had him on one of my earlier episodes. And his dad actually used to do open mics with me back in the day. And he used to tell some pretty fucked up jokes that he definitely wouldn't be able to get away with today if he tried them. That's for sure. I mean, he had a hard time getting away with them back then. And this was in the early 2000s. So, yeah. But it was always fun to watch him. Watch one of your friends' dads do stand-up. But yeah, those guys have always been like huge supporters of me, since I've started. And they used to let me perform with them quite a bit back in the day when there wasn't really a lot of stage time for comics. I mean, there weren't many comics either, but there wasn't a lot of stage time. So that was cool that they would allow me to go on stage with them and, tell some jokes, shit like that. Yeah, it's been 20 years, man. 20 years. They started 20 years ago. I started 20 years ago. That's when we both started around town doing gigs. And I actually recently got to do the biggest show I've ever done, like crowd-wise. I'll tell you about that. That happened in Albuquerque a couple of weeks ago. It was May 18th. I was about to leave town to go on a little tour, and so I had to do 2 shows in Boulder, Colorado the next night, and I always kind of struggle with performing on the same day that I travel. If possible, I like to travel and get there a day early so I can like go over stuff and make sure I'm prepared, especially when I'm headlining. So I always want to put on a good show. I mean, I do when I'm featuring too, but I feel like I've got my feature set down pretty good. But headlining is a different beast, So I was planning on going to Colorado on Wednesday, and had everything packed up and ready to go. And then Theo Vaughn texted me, and he's like, "Hey, bro, you want to do a set tonight?" And I was like, "Yeah, fuck yeah, dude." So yeah, I couldn't really turn that down, you know. I texted Theo when I first found out he was coming to town, and you know, I just kind of asked him if he had an opener or whatever, you know. I was like, and then I figured he already did, but you know, shot him a text anyway, and he said he didn't really know any details, so he said to text him when the date got closer, and I never did text him because you know, I was planning on going on the road and stuff, and I was gonna miss the show anyway. So, but then he texted me the day of and asked if I wanted to do a set. So I was like, yeah, I can't really turn that down, you know. So I ended up doing the show, and it was super cool. It was at the Kiva Auditorium, which is a really nice venue inside the convention center here in Albuquerque, and I would estimate there's probably about 2,000 people there, maybe a little less. But yeah, what a cool experience, you know. And Theo's tour manager is super cool, and his opening acts were cool. And the local guy AJ Matthews got to perform also, which was awesome. So AJ is a really nice guy. Yeah, the other opening acts were great. Ari Manis and Maddie Smith. Yeah, it was just, you know, from the beginning to end, an awesome show, of course. And I just went up and did 10 minutes after AJ, and you know, it just was a cool experience. It was such an easy crowd too, you know. They were so pumped up and just, you know, ready to laugh. And the 10 minutes went by like so fast. Like it felt like 5 minutes up there. And it was cool because, you know, there's a lot of local comics there and stuff like that. So, you know, that was really cool. You know, performing in front of a lot of friends and stuff like that. So, and I hadn't seen Theo, and let's see, so the first time I ever worked with him was in 2011 in Oklahoma City. We did a week together at the Looney Bin, and you know, we hit it off pretty well that week. We got to stay in the house together, so we're basically roommates from Wednesday through Sunday, you know. And it was cool to work with him because just seeing how hard he worked, you know, like this was back, he wasn't like a huge name back then. Like he had been on MTV and things like that, but he didn't really have any huge credits. Besides, I think Road Rules was the show. But it was cool to see. So we went to this bar to pick up some food after a show one night, and there's a bunch of girls like hitting on him and stuff like that. And they're asking if he wanted to hang out with them, and he's like, "No, we gotta get some work done tonight," you know. And I thought he was just kidding. I thought that was just a lie he made up so he can get out of there. But we went back to the condo and we ate food, and then we would stay up till 4 or 5 in the morning. And he was showing me his website he was working on at the time, cranktext.com. I don't know if it's still a thing or not, but it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. He would set up like all these fake Craigslist posts and then interact with people. They have the funniest interactions with these people and post them up on this website, cranktext.com. And so he would be working on stuff like that, and I would stay up with him, like reading his website and just laughing my ass off like all night. It's so funny. There's so much stuff on there. And yeah, just a super nice dude, fun to work with, very funny. But it was cool to see how hard he worked, you know, like he would work all night. Like literally he was up till 4 or 5 in the morning working, which I thought was awesome. So I got to see him again in 2017. He was performing at the Addison Improv, and I was performing, I was doing 2 weeks. I was doing Hyenas in Fort Worth and Dallas back to back, and I had a Sunday night off and saw that he was at the Addison Improv, and so I just sent him a message on Twitter, and I was like, "Hey man, is there any chance you can get me a comp to come see you Sunday? I'm doing Hyenas and stuff. I got a night off." And he gave me his phone number. He's like, "Yeah, text me, man." He's like, I'll get you in. I was like, "All right, cool." So Sunday came. I was on the list and everything. So it was kind of cool because I was just sitting there in the crowd watching the show, and the feature act was on stage already, and he's about halfway through his act. And my server comes over to me. He goes, "Hey, Theo wants you to do a guest spot." I was like, "Okay." Which I thought was kind of weird in the middle of a show, but I was like, "Shit, yeah, let's do it." And so I just got up out of my seat and then ended up doing like 10 minutes. And not to brag or anything, but I did pretty good. Had a really good set. And so that was cool. And just a cool thing, you know. I didn't get to hang out with him too much after the show. You know, he always takes his time to like talk to everybody and, you know, autograph shit and stuff like that. So I think that's really cool. But, you know, and I did get a chat with him. You know, he's super friendly as always. And then, and then this year, you know, texted me to do a set, which I thought was really cool. I got to see him in Oklahoma a couple years ago too. I didn't get a chance to talk with him after the show because I had to leave a little early and head back to Tulsa. But yeah, so I got to do the Kiva Auditorium, which was awesome. Great venue. His whole road crew was like super cool. You know, the guy filming and a couple other guys there, just super nice people. And hope the rest of his shows went well. He's got a big old tour bus now, which is cool, you know. So yeah, the next day I went up to Boulder, Colorado. I actually got up like super early, which is not fun for me. Because, you know, I got home after the show at the Kiva. I didn't get home till, you know, almost midnight. And then I had to make some food because I was hungry. And then, you know, you still got a bunch of adrenaline from the show and everything. So it's hard for me to fall asleep. I probably didn't get to sleep till about 1. Woke up at like 6:30, hit the road. And so yeah, Boulder was cool. My old friend Jesse Carter booked me on that. And he booked my buddy Don Morgan with me to feature, which was awesome. And it was a cool room. It was a room I'd done before. It's called License Number 1. And I'd done the show before years ago. And Jesse's got it set up a little different. It's a cool little room. It's kind of weird, a weird setup because I don't know. So we did 2 shows. The first show, there's only 7 people there, which is, you know, super weird going from 2,000 down to 7, you know. And you know, there are 3 people sitting way over here and 4 sitting way over here. So it's like, it's so hard to make eye contact with the people because you have to turn your head so far. The people should have just sat together is what I'm trying to say. Like, they didn't have to sit so goddamn far away. But they did. And, you know, for 7 people, they were actually really cool. And we had a good time. And then we had a late show. And that was a lot better than the 7. We had, I don't know how many people, but it was pretty packed in there. And, you know, it ended up being a really good show. And it was cool to see Don again. Don doesn't do a lot of stand-up anymore. And so it's always cool whenever I get an opportunity to bring him along or, you know, have him on a show. I always like to have him on a show because, 1, he's super funny. 2, he's one of my best friends. And then 3, I like seeing him perform because I could tell how happy he is doing it. You know what I mean? Like, he's genuinely enjoying himself, and that's cool. And it's also like me trying to nudge him to do more comedy. Like, see, motherfucker, you're funny. Because he does lack confidence sometimes, So he did the next night with me too. I was in Cheyenne, Wyoming, headlining a place called the Met, and I had done the show before as a feature act, and I did not do very well. Like, I didn't feel great about it, so I was a little nervous about this time. And the last time I did it, it's in this big banquet room, and it was a good sized crowd and everything, but it was also a big room, and everyone's spread out because of COVID at the time, and they didn't turn the lights down at all, and the crowd they're kind of lame, they weren't really my type of guys or gals, I like to get a little edgy, and this, they weren't really digging me too much, and whatever, no big deal. But it did make me nervous for this time because we're in the same big ballroom, and as the show was getting closer, I was getting a little nervous because I thought the show was supposed to be at 7:30 and nobody was there, and I was like, okay, this is gonna suck. So I have to do an hour. I haven't done an hour in a while, so a little nervous, but I was just like, let's go up there and have fun, That's what it's all about. And once showtime starts rolling around, they're actually starting the show at 8, and the email said 7:30, so that's why I was kind of freaking out. But anyways, the people start coming in, and they ended up packing the place, and it wasn't spread out this time, which was nice. And they dimmed the lights. The lighting was good and everything. The sound wasn't great, but the lighting was good. And we had Jeff Cohn from Denver went up and did 10 minutes and did really well. And then Don went up and featured, did awesome. And I went up and did an hour, like, so easy. Like, that crowd was so great that I did like a little over an hour. Plus, I still had plenty of material that I didn't even get to. You know what I mean? That's always a good sign of a good crowd, when you can, or a shitty crowd too, I guess, as I'll talk about the next night. So yeah, it was cool. It was just a solid hour. I didn't do much crowd work or anything like that. Didn't have to, which was nice. Sometimes I feel like I have to stretch a little bit to get to an hour. I don't know why. I've got plenty of material. I just kind of freak out just because I don't get many opportunities to do an hour. So I always get in my head like, oh, can I even do an hour? And it's like, yeah, you can. Just quit being a puss. So yeah, Cheyenne was a lot of fun. Loved it. And then so the next night I was going to the Naked Winery in Hill City, South Dakota, a gig I've done for, I think, the past 8 years, maybe something like that, 8 or 9. And Don was supposed to go with me to feature, but his daughter had a school thing come up, so I brought Jeff Cohn from Denver with me to feature. And Jeff's a cool dude. I had him on the podcast. Met him in Paris, Texas. Well, I didn't meet him there. I met him in Denver, but really got to hang out with him in Paris, Texas, at the Tower City Comedy Festival. And just super nice guy. And so the whole drive up to Hill City, we were pretty much talking about Troy Baxley, who's one of my all-time favorite comics. And I'll talk about my all-time favorite comics here in a bit. Troy Baxley is a guy from Denver, and Jeff hangs out with him quite a bit now. And Jeff was telling me that Troy had to retire recently due to his Parkinson's, which is really sad. Knowing that I'm never going to see Troy Baxley perform ever again is, it sucks because he was one of my favorites. Like, I never knew who he was until I got to open for him back in 2003. It was like one of my first times ever opening at the comedy club, Laughs in Albuquerque. And we had to do a Tuesday night casino gig in Espanola at the OK Casino, which was one of the worst gigs ever. But, I got done with my set, and the feature act did his set. And then I remember just sitting back and watching Troy for, the first couple minutes. I'm just like, this dude's on a different level than most people I've seen at the comedy club. And then he did a joke where he goes, here's the difference between men and women. Men will brag about the size of their genitals. He's like, you'll never hear women do that. Guys would be like, hey, Jim, my dick's as big as that pole. He's like, yeah, in your dreams, Thomas. And he goes, you never hear women go, hey, Cindy, my vagina's so big it could pull the toenails off an elephant's foot. Check it out. And when I heard that joke, I had to leave the lounge. I was laughing so hard. I'd never heard anything that funny in so long. And I was just like, oh, I got to watch this guy the rest of the week. I got to really pay attention. And then I went back in there and I watched the rest of the show, and I was just floored at how funny he was. And I was like, how do I not know who this guy is? You know what I mean? He didn't have any big credits or anything like that. And so I got to watch him the entire week. 7 shows we did together, and I was just blown away at how funny he was. And every 7 shows were totally different too. He had so much material that he would just bounce back and forth, just whatever popped into his head, it seemed like. And it was awesome to watch. I'll get back into Baxley in a bit. So yeah, we go to Hill City, Naked Winery. Fun little gig, up by Mount Rushmore. Cool area of South Dakota, the only cool area of South Dakota. The rest is flat bullshit. But yeah, it was a great show. About 20, 25 people or so. Not a huge crowd, but it's not a big venue either. So, 20 to 25 feels packed. And going back to what I was saying earlier about doing an hour, I was supposed to do an hour again that night. Ended up doing an hour and 9 minutes, but I would guess maybe 30 of it was material, and the rest was just talking shit to this table who, didn't know to shut the fuck up during the show. And it wasn't bad. It was they didn't ruin the show. They just ruined me not being able to do my show. And but it went well, and I was able to make fun of them enough where the rest of the crowd was enjoying it. And or at least I hope they were. They told me afterwards they were, so that's good. But yeah, it ended up being a cool trip up there. It was cool to, have Jeff on. He doesn't get many opportunities to do, a big 30-minute set. So that was cool for him to get that opportunity. He did well, I told him, that crowd's very similar to a comedy club style crowd. So, you can probably do some of your dirtier stuff and, get away with it. So that was cool. And then it's kind of funny on the way back. I stopped to get gas in Custer, South Dakota, and this lady was pulling up. I was at the gas pump. I'd finished pumping gas, and I had to pull up my map and stuff like that. And she was very impatient, and I could tell that she was waiting for a gas pump, but she was really bitchy. So I was kind of being a dick back. She rolls her window down. I've got my window down, and she goes, she said, "Hey, are you leaving soon?" So I need that pump. And I paused before I answered her, just to be a dick. Just to like drag it out as long as I could. And I just kind of stared at her and I go, "What?" Even though I heard her. And then she goes, "Are you going to leave soon? I need that pump." And I was like, "Oh, yeah. Yeah, I just need to pull up my map so I know where I'm going." And then just stared at her for a little bit, just to be a dick. So I hope she got her fucking precious gas, got to where she needed to be. I hate people. So yeah, that was a fun little week doing comedy, though. It was like I really needed that week. It was cool. It was good to know that I've got a solid hour that I could do, because sometimes I lack confidence too, just like my buddy Don Morgan. And but no, it was really cool. Had a blast. And then I've got a ton of shows coming up too. They're all scrolling along the bottom there. See, I wanted to talk about my top 5 comedians of all time. So my buddy Jarrett Reddick, who did my intro music, he was asked by this website to provide his top 5 favorite stand-up comedians of all time. And he tagged me in the post that when he posted it. So he wanted to know my top 5. So I'll read you his top 5. So his top 5, he's got Eddie Murphy. He said Delirious came out when he was in 8th grade and his parents let him stay up and watch it. And he said the words "ice cream man" would never come out of my mouth the same after that one. And he said he's a little too young to really understand the bit where the honeymoons fuck each other in the ass. But the impression itself was enough to make me laugh, which I thought was funny. See, I didn't even know what the honeymooners was when I heard that bit. But yeah, I remember laughing at that bit too, just because it was funny. And I don't even know how old I was when Delirious came out, but I think I'm 8 years younger than Jarrett, so I guess I would have been I don't know, like in kindergarten maybe. I mean I didn't watch it in kindergarten, I know that, but I do remember listening to it. My mom was a big stand-up comedy fan, so I definitely remember hearing Eddie Murphy. And it's so funny because I remember when I first moved to Albuquerque, my sister had some friends and her last name was Sanchez. And I remember getting so excited. I was like, "Hey, Sanchez, goony goo goo." So that was always cool. And then, okay, so here's number 4. Number 4 is Mitch Hedberg, of course. Mitch and Eddie both definitely in my top 10. Yeah, Mitch. Jared says, "I hear his voice in my head every time I get a receipt for a donut." And I'm sure everybody knows what that's about. Yeah, I've heard so many cool stories about Mitch over the years. A lot of my friends knew him pretty well. And oh man, gone way too soon for sure. Number 3 on his list is Anthony Jeselnik, which is awesome. I don't know if I'd have him in my top 10, but he's definitely one of my favorite current guys. I just I like his style a lot, and he says some fucked up shit, like his parents telling him that Santa Claus was black, so when he found out he wasn't real, he wasn't as disappointed. That shit's funny. So number 2, of course, Steve Martin, who Bowling for Soup was actually named after one of his bits. Actually, I have a little bit of a connection to Steve Martin. So Steve Martin, when his book came out, Born Standing Up, I was reading his book, and he was talking about his first paid gig he ever did was want to say 1964 or something like that. I could be way off on the year, but it was in Aspen, Colorado. And the guy who booked him was George Mckelvey, who was an old friend of mine. George was he was known as the godfather of Denver comedy. He opened the first comedy club in Denver. He opened Mckelvey's Comedy Club. And he's also, I believe he was part of opening the Comedy Works, which is one of the best clubs in the country. And I'll be there June 21st. But anyway, George was so cool. He actually moved to Albuquerque and, lived there the last few years of his life. And it was cool having him there because, I had, the club owner, Russ Rivas, was a comic. And then we had George, who was, old school comic. Like, he booked Steve Martin in the 60s. So, I didn't know how famous George was until, I read that in the book. I was like, holy shit, that's cool. And I have a funny little George story. I could tell it now because he's dead. He won't give a shit. So George calls me on the phone one day and he goes, he's like, hey, I got to ask you a question, but I don't want to do it over the phone. And I thought that was super weird. So he's like, hey, let's meet up at IHOP or something for lunch. And I was like, all right, cool. So I meet up with him and he goes, do you know anywhere where I can get some grass? And this was like in the 2000s. And I was like, they don't call it grass anymore. But I'll get you some. And so I ended up hooking George up with some grass. And he calls me 2 days later. And he's like, yeah, it didn't really work for me. It just kind of put me to sleep, Used to make me super creative. And I was like, all right, no big deal. So he gave me the grass back. And I don't know what I did with it. I gave it to some other comics probably. Anyway, rest in peace, George. And Jarrett's number one comedian, also my number one comedian, also has a new documentary out on HBO. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. George Carlin, the best comic of all time, in my opinion, and Jarrett's obviously. But yeah, I've probably told this story on the podcast a couple times. Like, the reason I started doing stand-up was because of George Carlin. My mom was watching George Carlin on HBO, and I was 3 or 4 at the time, so this would have been 83, 84. I think I was 84. And so I would hear my mom laughing in the living room, and she didn't laugh very often because my dad was an asshole. And so I would go out there to see what she was laughing at. And we must have had a conversation about it because my mom told me a couple of weeks later I had packed up a suitcase and I had my little jacket on and my little stupid ball cap. I looked like Leave It to Beaver. And she caught me walking out the door and she goes, where are you going? I go, I'm going to New York City. And she goes, why are you going to New York City? And I was like, I'm going to live with George Carlin and do stand-up comedy, make people laugh. And she said, well, you should probably wait a few years for that. So glad I did. But I never have been to New York City. Never got to work with George Carlin. But the documentary was great. It was cool to watch. I knew a lot of his story, reading his autobiography and stuff. But there's a lot of cool footage in there, that you don't get to see when you're reading the book, obviously. So there's a lot of cool old footage, and you get to see his progression over the years, how he started out, he's doing the comedy duo thing, and then he turns himself into a little hippie dude, and then this is cool. And then to see like how he turns out, like, in my era when I started watching him, and he had all these HBO specials. And it even showed the, they were talking about the one that came out in 2005. I remember watching that when it came out, and I remember being a little disappointed because it wasn't that funny to me. It was just this dark, and it did seem like he was just kind of angry. And then I waited a few months, probably about 6 months, I'd say. And I went back and watched it again, and I enjoyed it a lot more. And I'm glad I went back and watched it again because, he died a couple years after that. And I actually still remember exactly where I was when I found out he died. I was driving up to Denver to do a set at the Comedy Works, and I was pulled over at exit 323, the Villanueva exit, and my friend Mark Shooter texted me and told me that George was dead. And it was just I don't know, it was a weird drive up there. I had my wife at the time and a couple friends, and it was cool having them with, but I don't know, it was a sad day. And I remember doing the show that night, like right before I went on stage, I had an idea, and I wish I would have thought of it earlier in the day because it would have worked. I think it would have worked pretty well. So I was just doing a short set where I was going to do, 8 or 9 jokes. But like right before I went on stage, I was like, what if each joke I just do one of the 7 words? Like the first one would be shit. This one would be piss. And then, down the line. But I thought of it like 5 minutes before my set. So I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to edit that stuff in, or rearrange my set the way I want it to. And so, yeah, I was kind of bummed at myself for not thinking of that earlier. I thought that would have been cool little tribute to George. But yeah, very sad finding out that he passed away. But I still love going back and watching his old specials. There's a bunch of them on Tubi, which is cool. I love watching those old ones. It brings back a lot of memories and stuff. And, it's funny to see how many jokes that I still quote from him, and like my family still quotes stuff like that. Like when my brother farts, he'll always go, "Say, is that Golf Digest?" So that's pretty cool. So yeah, that was Jared's top 5. George Carlin was my number 1. My top 5, I put, the next 4 I didn't really put in order. But Stephen Wright was up there. He was the one that kind of, remember the first time I saw him, I was like 13. My friend was like, "You gotta see this dude. I think you'd really like him." So he was like on the Tonight Show or something like that. And I absolutely loved him. And, he became one of my favorites right then. And then when I started writing jokes and stuff, I kind of patterned myself based on him because, I had some longer jokes, but I didn't like them. I didn't like telling them. I didn't like, how long it took to get to the punchline, things like that, So I just made the jokes as short as possible. And that's kind of, inspired by him. So yeah, Stephen Wright, just a great joke writer. Very funny, super clever. And then Andy Kaufman, of course, was, not necessarily a stand-up comedian, but I don't know. Just I loved how he would fuck with people. Like I always liked that. Like I used to watch Man on the Moon before I would do open mics, like for inspiration, and just to make me, put me in a silly mood. And I think that really helped a lot with my nerves because I was always so nervous back then. And but I still cry when he dies in the movie, like every time I see it, even though I know it's coming. It's fucking sad. So my other two in the top 5, I had Troy Baxley. So like I was saying earlier about Troy, the first time I saw him, I was just so floored at how good he was. And then, so he gave me a CD of his the week we worked together. And I listened to that thing nonstop for like a month. Like, it was annoying my friends how much I would, because I would do his jokes. I would, like, he has this thing where he like sings after the punchline, like he's got a joke about his dad having a belly button with a mullet on it, and he would sing belly button mullet, sad but true. And so I just do shit like that all the time, because it gets stuck in your head. And like all my friends would always know when I was working with Troy, because I'd do that shit for like a month. And Troy was cool. He had me open for him like pretty much every time he came down to Albuquerque. So I would get to watch him, 7 shows every time. And I remember counting one time. I watched him perform over 100 times, and it was always brilliant. Like, even if he was, so sometimes he would do a bad show on purpose, where he would tell his worst jokes, which were far funnier than anything I had. He would do his act outs like 10 seconds longer. Just because he didn't like the crowd. Like, if the crowd didn't like me, he didn't like the crowd a lot of times. And I thought that was cool. So he would just go up and like fuck with them. And to me, it was just brilliant watching him. And God, I could tell Troy Baxley stories for days, but if you get a chance, go listen to he's got 2 albums on like iTunes and stuff. And like ask any comic that's been doing comedy for 20 plus years if they know who Troy Baxley is. And I bet a majority of them would say, oh, fuck yeah. He was like a true comics comic. And just when he was on top of his game, like, he was untouchable. And a guy who I feel like that now, also part of my top 5, Chad Daniels. Man, he's got like 6 or 7 albums out. And love this dude. I got to work with him twice, like 2 weeks in a row, several years ago. And just brilliant dude. Super nice. Like, just one of the funniest people in person also. Like, just not on stage, but in person. And he's got work ethic like Theo Vaughn too. Like, he writes and writes and writes and just works his ass off. And I think that's cool. And just great dude. Yeah, we were working together in Wichita one time. It's funny. I was eating a Baconator, and he's like, hey, can I try a bite of that? And then he ate the whole thing. He's like, fuck, that was pretty good. And then he drove me back to Wendy's and bought me another one, and then bought one for himself too. But yeah, if you get a chance to see Chad Daniels live, fucking phenomenal. I was actually able to line him up with Jarrett. Jarrett has a podcast with Gary from Bowling for Soup called the Rockstar Dad Show, and they interview like musicians and comedians and stuff who have kids and things, and they just kind of talk about what it's like raising kids and being on the road all the time. And Jarrett mentioned that Chad was one of his favorite comedians, and I told him that I kind of knew him and stuff. I worked with him years ago, and I was able to get those guys in touch, and Jarrett had him on his podcast. It was a really cool episode. You should go check it out. Because Jarrett was asking about his confidence on stage. I thought that was a cool way he answered. So go listen to it. So I'm not gonna butcher it on here. What else? Okay, that's about it. All that I wanted to cover this week. I didn't think I would get to 45 minutes. Holy shit. Yeah, so the George Carlin documentary, check it out. Also, I want to hear your top 5 comedians. Email me in the Wry Podcast at gmail.com. Or send a message on Facebook or whatever, or comment on the video when I post it. I'm going to watch Norm Macdonald's new special. We'll talk about that next week. Wearing my Norm shirt right now. Can't really see it, but that's Norm. God damn it. So yeah, we'll talk about that next week for sure. Go follow me on social media, Twitter at Funny Fletcher, Instagram, comedian Curt Fletcher. My YouTube, that's where I post the video for In the Wry Podcast. You can find it on funnyfletcher.com. And let me read off my shows I got coming up. If you go to funnyfletcher.com and click on shows or schedule, these will all be on there with links to tickets. So June 17th, 18th, Loonies in Colorado Springs. Be co-headliner with my buddy Cesar Cervantes. June 19th, Boulder, Colorado, Rayback Collective. June 21st, Denver, Colorado, Comedy Works. June 23rd, Arvada, Colorado, Lukey Brewing, I think it's called. June 24th, 2 shows at the Denver Comedy Lounge. June 26th, I'll be headlining Dry Heat Comedy Club here in Albuquerque. New club downtown. Go check it out. July 1st and 2nd, I'll be at Laughs in Tucson. July 7th, Mescalero, New Mexico, Into the Mountain Gods with my buddy Ron Feingold. July 15, 16, Glendale, Arizona, Stir Crazy Comedy Club with Tim Gaither. August 4th, headlining Rio Rancho Brew Lab here right down the streets. September 2nd and 3rd, I'll be headlining Kazi's Comedy Club, Newport News, Virginia. And September 15th through the 17th, I'll be at the Laughing Gas Comedy Club with Tim Gaither. That's in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, I think is how you pronounce that. And I've heard nothing but good things about that club, so I'm excited to do that one. Same with Kazi's, never been there, so it's cool to be working some new clubs. Also, thanks for tuning in. I hope you like the new format. Let me know what you think of it, you guys. I don't know. Sometimes I'm kind of nervous to do solo podcasts, but, got to stop being a puss. So that's it for this week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you.